Hello YouTube, hello everyone, and welcome to yet another week of London After Midnight. And I've just been told that I never remember to introduce myself. I tend to take my own presence for granted, because when I look around I'm usually there. So that's my excuse. But yes, so I am Alex, hello, this is my channel, this is my podcast. And if all of my guests for this week could just quickly say hello, they can add whatever they want to that, just any kind of, I don't know. My brain is frazzled this week, apologies for that, but it will show. I think appearing for your second time, Fratis Knox.
Hey everybody.
And appearing multiple times, Cokie Pirate.
So, you have a name, you're like, not a voice in my head?
I know, it's shocking, isn't it? I was quite surprised by that news too. I've lived most of my life thinking that I was a voice in your head. True story. And Schizophrenic Queen.
Howdy ho.
And Midnight Goddess.
Evening.
So, basically, it's been a very news-busy week, as I'm sure most people listening will know. And this is a topic I don't know a huge amount about, which is Boko Haram. And to give a better introduction to this topic, the man who suggested it, I'm going to hand you over to Fratis Knox.
So, Boko Haram is a terrorist organization in Africa who's been terrorizing Nigeria for about 10 years. Their name literally translates to death to Western education. They're very violent people. They've just recently kidnapped 276 schoolgirls from a private boarding school in northern Nigeria. Last year, they kidnapped some Christian women from northern Nigeria and sold them into slavery. They've been around for about 10 years, like I said. Then the international media's never much reported them like most African stuff. I'm just thinking of Coney 2012. And now the question's been, which has been chucked around a couple of times, is should the US or the EU or in general NATO intervene in the conflict with Boko Haram, or should we stay out of it and leave it to Africa and the African Union or Nigeria itself, because Nigeria has a very large military force? And the second question is, why hasn't the media reported about it? Do we have a bias? Is this news not important? And those two questions are the two questions I could think of, and I'd just hand them off to everyone. Maybe starting with Schizophrenia Queen.
Oh, hello. I think a lot of it, or at least part of it, I should say, is that people don't necessarily know that these things are going on. And people do tend to be more immediately concerned with things that directly affect them.
So
yeah.
So you're going to say that because Africa is a far away place, especially from America, and it doesn't directly affect America in a way. That's why the media isn't reporting on them that much.
And yes, and with that, people have seemed to not care about it because they simply didn't know about it.
Okay.
It's a self-perpetuating problem.
And the media is very selective about these things for whatever reasons it has.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, when did this thing start? You mentioned like it's a decade old or something like that. In 2004, I mean, there was a lot of other stuff going on in the media spotlight. I'm thinking particularly, the conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on.
I mean, as far as I know, it's at least 10 years old, but they've been around for a while. They've been kicking around for a while. I mean, they've been not just in Nigeria. They've been in Cameroon and Chad. They've been around since, according to the Wikipedia page, since 2001. So they've been kicking around for about 15 years now. So,
Yeah, I gotta say that, especially... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Shouldn't the simple fact that they're dealing in human trafficking be something that we should all care about, regardless of whether it's happening on our soil or somebody else's?
The media's got to decide to care where what the question that this article is raising is I'm paraphrasing, but why did we just start caring? When I say we, why did it suddenly become something that we should care about? And it seems like the media ignored it for quite some time, and then suddenly it's like an on, like they flick the switch when it suits them.
Question: were the most recent victims white?
Nope. They were all colored, women of color.
Okay,
between 16 and 20, and all with school. I think, if I give my opinion, I think we shouldn't intervene generally, because I don't think we would do very well. What most people don't know is that most of northern Nigeria is jungle, and they're insurgents. So we're looking at a campaign like in Vietnam, which would, as we all know of history, Vietnam ended terribly well for America.
That never stops Americans, but then again, their resources are really spread out right now, and it's the last thing they need is a confrontation. Although human trafficking bothers me, and I think it's a global problem.
And I mean, why we just started caring? I think this is a really, really good story for media. I mean, if you're from a newspaper mind or a TV mind, what's better than media than hundreds of young girls going missing, the government being completely not capable of stopping these people? It just makes for good news. Even if that sounds horrible, it makes for very, very good news.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people doing the whole bring back our girls thing, you know, it's sort of like, well, you're doing this to look good because you didn't bother with this and you didn't bother with that. Now people are paying attention to X, Y, and Z is when you care about X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
I think I'd actually like interested what other people think of should the US or the UN or Europe intervene in the conflict.
To be honest, I don't think I trust the US to intervene in anything, and if they did, I wouldn't trust their motives. And as you say, intervention it generally doesn't work out too well.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, there hasn't been interventions that have worked very well. I mean, you're old enough, the same as me, being old enough to remember Yugoslavia, which in the long term, I mean, in the short term, the violence was pretty heavy, but in the long term, those nations have become somewhat stable. The violence has definitely gone down. It worked. You know, whatever you think of those interventions, they worked in the end. You can't claim anything else.
They work, but is the U.S. really the right people? Like, I'm Canadian, so even our hand is much gentler than the U.S., and I don't know if, even though we specialize in diplomatic resolution, I'm not even sure we could handle that.
Yeah, and I just say that, well, I'm not entirely crazy about, getting involved in another conflict. You do have to ask, if not the U.S., then who? I mean, I'd like it to be a multilateral NATO collaborative effort with a lot of UN participation. Get as many different people involved as possible if there is going to be something. But in terms of actually having the funds and resources to do this kind of a manhunt, I mean, the U.S. seems like they're the best equipped. That being said, the way Fratis describes it, it doesn't seem like a very hopeful endeavor. Maybe we can offer support to the local Nigerian forces a bit to a greater extent, but yeah, they definitely seem to have the home team advantage.
I mean, I've just my girlfriend's just called up the Wikipedia article. They're also in collaboration with at least parts of Al Qaeda. So, I mean, the U.S. right now, under its current Military Activation Act, would have the means and things, even without a congressional approval, to intervene in this conflict under the current how it currently stands with U.S. law. Because U.S. law currently frames it in a way that all affiliates, people who housed, sheltered, assisted, loads of other words. Basically, anyone who helped in any way Al-Qaeda is classed as a terrorist and can be and will be prosecuted by the U.S. or attacked by the U.S. or the U.S. holds the right to attack them under its law. So theoretically, the U.S. could intervene tomorrow if they felt like it. Like I said, the question is should they and could they? I mean, all the other nations. I mean, I don't think any other Western nation, maybe barring Canada, but even Canada, I don't think has the forces and people and equipment to intervene in the conflict like that.
And going by their principles and, well, their name, it seems highly unlikely that these people will be peacefully re-enfranchised and integrated, huh? These are like some really nasty people.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to remember, that these people are, nasty, nasty people. Like I said, they sell people into slavery or into forced marriages. They will attack school institutions in Nigeria, especially for girls. They'll do really horrible things, and according to reports, they've killed more than 10,000 people in the last 10 years.
Wow. This sounds like an oh dearism moment for me. I think it's just this sounds like one of those things that you wish you could do something about and you don't know how. Whether the UN would be better to go in, I don't really feel qualified to comment.
Well, the thing about the UN is useless unless the US decides to make it useful.
Right.
The biggest force, Libya is a good example of the UN trying to do something, failing, the US then coming in and basically helping along. Like France, England, and was it Spain? I think it might have been Spain, try to intervene in Libya. That worked for about a week or two. Then they started running into trouble with their gear and not having enough weapons and bombs and stuff to actually intervene. Then the US had to come out and help. And that was just enforce a no-fly zone. I mean, this isn't even a ground force operation. So UN operation would be, if at all, a US-led probably operation.
Well, does anybody else have anything to add?
I think you summed it up really well. Calling it an oh dearism just seems really difficult. I don't know, like, between Syria and Crimea and I don't know. It seemed like for a while I thought that the world was like in a state of relative peace, except it just seems to be unraveling lately. But then again, the whole relative peace was pretty short anyway, huh?
So I don't know which bit of the world or which heap of shit that's going on to be most depressed by or scared by, to be honest.
For me, that would definitely be Russia's resurging imperialism. But okay, that's right in front of my doorstep, sitting in Europe, so,
Yeah. Okay. Do we feel that we're done with this topic?
I think so.
I think so really well.
Okay, well, this has been Monday's London After Midnight, so it's goodbye from Fratis.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from Queenie.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from Koki.
May the hamster prosperity rest upon your head.
And yours also. And goodbye from Midnight.
Good night, and be nice to the chickens, man.
Exactly. And it's good night from me, Alex. So, happy Tuesday, YouTube. Happy Tuesday, everyone. And today's topic is, for anyone who doesn't know, a few years ago, around, I think, 2008, there were a series of murders of women sex workers in the Ipswich area. And it was understandably very difficult for that community. And it was, of course, very big in the media here in the UK. And I only just recently found out that a couple of years ago a London musical started about the case. And they're now making it into a film with an actress called Olivia Colman, who you may not know her by name, but she's in a few British shows. She's in Broadchurch, for example. So the film version is going to be reasonably high profile, at least. And this, of course, I mean, you can make a musical about very serious things. In fact, there always used to be. And you can say that some popular musicals, well, Les Miserables is about serious things, but it's a long time ago, and the actual characters are themselves fictional. This isn't just a stage and screen adaptation, it's a musical about a community who, within the last few years, went through, well, encountering this serial killer. Now, I actually was curious enough to play some of the soundtrack and to read up on it a bit. The lyrics are done verbatim style. In other words, they've taken actual interview quotes to make the lyrics and tried even to be true to the meter of it and things like that. And the defense, I suppose, would be it's more about the community coping and rebuilding. They don't actually show it isn't like a sort of I'm stabbing you kind of song moment. But I think that the question is, I mean, obviously this kind of debate often comes up of when do we censor art? Should we ever censor art? In this instance, is it disrespectful to the memories of the people who were killed? I'm not actually aware of any complaints by the relatives that survived them, not from the research that I had time to do. But is it ever okay to have something like a musical about real-life serial murders? Koki?
Well, I've heard that comedy is tragedy plus time. It could just be lacking a critical ingredient here. Though, I think that there's some stuff that will probably never be, well, funny. And it's not supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be, a musical. But what I mean to say is that these are still some fresh wounds, and maybe the musical can handle it very even-handedly. But, you know, it's something that you have to be careful about, I guess is what I mean to say. Especially when it's something that happened so recently.
Yeah. Fratis, your thoughts?
I think, first of all, the murders were in 2006. He was convicted in 2008. That's important for my opinion, because, I mean, it's nearly 10 years ago, and that gives me an important question. At what point is it okay to start, you know, making media of it? Is it 10 years? Is it 15? Is it 50? Is it 100? And you know, that's an important question. I think different people would answer that question differently. But I mean, even with saying, okay, it needs to be some time between when it happened and when we're going to make stuff out of it. I mean, there's lots of other pieces of media, I'm going to say, which are very stabby. Just think of Evita. I mean, Evita is a very, very famous thing, and it's about a bloody coup in Argentina. I mean, this specific one has even been done as a TV series on the BBC called Five Daughters.
Okay.
Which was actually about the murders, not about the community. That's my last point. That this show is not about murders. It's about the community dealing with those murders. And I think that can be an important and very good thing to do and very good thing to film. You know, it can even be helping for the community, I think, in a personal sense. That, you know, showing that the community can deal and will survive and will continue and will grow out of it. That's just my opinion. I think...
Now that you mention it, I did see at least some of that series, and I think it did show due reverence. I think it was respectful. I suppose the problem with a musical is, even though it's not a comedy musical, a lot of people have a problem with what approach you take tonally, and that there's a kind of extra issue of appropriateness. I mean, Evita kind of has its upbeat moments, and it's got its satire and its irony at times. And yes, it's about real life things, but it's also about more distant history. Although I suppose, actually, I think the musical was originally written in the 70s. I'm not quite sure.
I think it was mid-60s, and she got cooed out of office in 52.
Oh, okay.
And then there's Sweeney Todd.
Well, those weren't real murders.
I thought they were based on at least real murders.
Well, I suppose it's kind of folklore loosely based on some real events, but I mean there wasn't actually a barber called Sweeney Todd, and those victims aren't real people. I do take your point, although again that's a Sondheim opera from the 70s about the late 19th century, so to whatever degree real, I think it's again a big distance. I don't know. I would say a more accurate, a closer comparison would be if it was a Whitechapel's murder musical, where at least you could say Jack the Ripper was 100 years earlier. And obviously, I suppose part of the question is it depends how much one thinks one needs to consider the community, who I suppose that the people of that part of Ipswich. I didn't find anything that said they were in uproar. Maybe they appreciated it. Maybe it was that they found it respectful. Maybe even thought it was cathartic. But Midnight, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I do. You were talking about the time frames of Freitas. Now in Canada, we had Paul Bernardo and Carla Hamolka. This was a married couple. Paul Bernardo turned out to be the Scarborough rapist. And he had, I believe it was over 50 rapes in under a year and a half. And as well, he murdered 2 girls, as well as his wife's little sister, after doing, you can imagine what he did to them. The man's in jail for life. The closest thing that Canada has to a death sentence, he's got. And I'm not going to dox myself by say where I'm living. But let's just say I was close enough to be scared.
Right.
So if somebody came out, and this, we're talking, late 90s, okay? Because I lived through that terror, I would personally, I'd be like in an uproar if they did something about that and glamorized it in any sense.
Well, I mean,
I do agree it could help. I do agree that it could help the community heal, and I am aware that they're not dealing with the actual crimes or anything. But I just remember, being scared all the time, and, no one ever traveling by themselves and, stuff like that, because Paul Bernardo is incredibly sadistic and incredibly terrifying, and nobody knew who it was for the longest time. So I just know, having been on the flip side of that if there's a very tenuous line. And it's almost like you have to make sure that you're doing your balancing act properly, because if it's done well, it can heal. But if it falters in even one adaptation issue when it comes from the play to the movie, it could harm a lot of people. And that's my concern. Like, if the play has been going for a while and that has been okay, my concern is when stuff goes from theater to video, like movie, it tends to be over glamorized and overdone, because that's what people want when they go to the movies. So there's just this line where they could, not saying intentionally, but they could, hurt the families at that point.
Yeah, I mean, having heard some tracks but not seen the stage version, I can't entirely vouch for it tonally. This is where musicals, I think, are tricky, as you say, it's gauging it exactly right. Where in a sense, I would say I do detect a sort of dark humour from it, but at the same time, it's very serious. It's sort of a bit difficult to explain. Some people would just, because I think you say musical and people think, as you said, glamorous. People think, although that's actually, in fact, we've already discussed several examples of very dark, very gritty musicals, and they can be very intelligent. They can be very insightful. I think this is aiming to use the medium of the musical for social comment. So I'm kind of on the fence. I think that the film. I'll admit I'm very interested in the stage version. Probably if I'd known about it, might have considered going to see it. But I'm 50-50 as to whether the film will. I think it'll either work or it won't. So anybody have any closing comments?
I'd like to actually jump back in. I mean, it very much depends. I mean, what I've seen of the choices of actors, they've picked very solid, very good actors. They've picked people who are mainly stage actors, who tend to be very good as actors, especially as drama actors. I mean, I think Tennant was picked as one of them.
I didn't know Tennant was in it, but that's certainly Olivia Colman, who is Tennant's Broadchurch co-star. Maybe they put them both in, so that sounds pretty solid. Yeah, if it's Tennant and Coleman, and yes, well, something with them in it, I'll definitely watch.
I mean, that's one of the things. At least they're picking actors that tend to be very good in their roles.
Yeah,
and tend to take their job very seriously, which does give me hope that that it might work out. I mean, it very much depends on what they're going to frame it as. I wouldn't say I'm 50-50. I mean, it's a BBC production. The BBC tends to be, how does one frame it in a good way? Very careful in what they do.
Yeah.
Because they're much more open to complaint, and they have to act much quicker on complaint than other media.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm going to say I'm less than 50-50. I'm more like 60 or 70, 30, 40 or something. I'm going to say I have a good feeling that it might turn out quite well.
You're confident in the project?
I'm somewhat confident. I mean, just the BBC producing it, which, like I said, tends to be a very careful thing. The actors they've picked, the actors they've picked, and a few other things is just I just could see it working quite well.
I think when we've seen it, we should do a show discussing it, having seen it, which could be in several months, of course, I'd imagine, because I think it's going into production now. So, who's up for that?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I love serial killers with the bizarre passion, so.
Okay.
Can I just say that Fradis's optimism now makes me optimistic? I hope they handle it well.
I hope they handle it well, but with Fradis mentioning that the BBC tends to be on the more careful side, which is not a bad thing, I'm just thinking they could go too careful and still hurt people because of the way they're portraying them falsely, to be too careful, you know what I mean?
I think so. You can have you can have one extreme, or you can have the other.
So I think when we look at that, I don't think so. I mean, the BBC is famous for its dramas. I mean, some of the best drama series in the last 10 years have been BBC productions. So they're very, very good with drama stuff, or at least the TV series. I don't watch a lot of BBC movies, to be honest. But I'm going to assume they're just as good at doing movies as they are series. At which point, I have a great amount of trust in their dramaturgic performances. They've been very good. I mean,
they've definitely produced a lot of good drama series and one-off dramas. And I'm trying to think, I've definitely seen films produced by BBC Films before that I've liked. But yeah, BBC is still what would be the word? A badge of quality. Maybe not as much as it was once, but it still is. They definitely have integrity. And yeah, I think probably they wouldn't have picked the topic if they weren't confident. Obviously, this is something that's been on at the Old Vic. It's had a theatrical success in London, where obviously there's a lot of theatre people. So yeah, I would imagine certainly share your confidence that there'll be a lot of thought behind this. They've not chosen this project on a whim. So yeah. Anybody else? Anything to add?
Just that I really hope they're careful with the tightrope that they're about to start walking on.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. One thing that I hope they address, because one thing that I remember at the time, which was an offshoot of the whole discussion and kind of the whole media thing, which was the media talking about the murder of prostitutes being murdered, and some critics saying, "Could you please say women? Can you please say women?" And obviously, you know what some of the scummy press in the UK are like, to the point of you can phrase it in such a way as it's not quite murder, he's kind of doing a public service kind of thing. And actually the police themselves, being very careful, always say women. This is not about the murder of prostitutes, this is about the murder of women. And so because I remember that sticks out in my head, and again, that's a topic you've got to approach properly. I'm curious to know, because the musical is verbatim from interviews, etc., if that's actually something which I might listen to the whole soundtrack at some point. If that's something that they really go into, because as far as I can recall, that was obviously this was as Fratis says, it was 8 or 9 years ago. But as far as I recall, that was quite a big part of it. Actually, that's kind of its own avenue. I'll open up the floor to comment on that issue.
Repeat that last bit.
Oh, well, simply that the issue of if somebody's murdering women who are sex workers, in the UK, a lot of the media want to report it as the murder of prostitutes.
Well,
yeah.
In Canada, we actually had murders of, in Alberta, we had murders of Native women who were prostitutes. And the police didn't really do much until the white woman had been killed. And during the trial, one of the police officers were asked, why didn't you do anything? And he said, well, it was just another Indian.
Right.
And so I think, whether it's prostitute or in Canada calling them, the Aboriginal just natives, like they don't matter, I think it's a way of dehumanizing them so the person feels more righteous about themselves, the one who's writing it. I've always found that people who refer to murder victims by their either by their ethnicity or like their occupation are people who are trying to make that person look bad and themselves feel better for their superiority. I have a good job writing for a newspaper, and she was just a whore on the street,
Right.
Go ahead, Corky.
Okay, I was going to say, it's interesting that you bring up, the kind of classism elements in it. Race plays into it, and also prostitution, sex work in general is seen as a very sort of low-end job. I'd say that another angle at it is just sort of the puritanical sense that a lot of people have, that this is kind of the punishment you get for pursuing this kind of lifestyle. While we wouldn't, I don't think many people would go to the extreme of saying that this is a service, though actually, yeah, a lot of people would. But, I think that the consensus is that most people wouldn't say this is the service. But I think a lot of people would like to validate, their own, I guess, notions of purity by seeing horrible things happen to those that violate it.
I think my angle would have been a little bit of a different one on the story. I mean, so the question is, or as far as I read on the story when I started doing a little bit of research into the murders themselves, is that it kicked loose a little bit of a discussion on prostitutes itself. You know, should it stay illegal? What kind of things should we bring up and stuff like that? And I think like a discussion like that, especially in England, would be very productive. I mean, in Germany we had that discussion about 10 years ago now. I think 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, and we've since then went and legalized prostitution.
Right. And have people been safer as a result?
Yes, there's been multiple studies on this. That after prostitution was legalized, crime rates went down. In all nations that have done this, by the way, it's not just Germany; it's Holland and Austria. Okay. And all the nations that have legalized prostitution, crime rates go down. The safety and health of the sex workers goes up. It has a lot of very positive things. And obviously, in Germany at least, we also tax sex workers, just like a normal job. We tax them.
Right.
So, you know, they pay a tax, but they also get all the positive things from taxes.
Okay. Well, if it's proven to work, it's proven to work. Unfortunately, people seem not to think this way. That they want, like France going over to the Swedish model, and but
personally, I think the Swedish model is awful. But
well, exactly, yeah.
Completely different topic.
Well, all right. But what I'm saying is that things being proven to work in practice never seems to translate into the minds of the people who make the decisions.
Well, the strange thing is, since we've legalized it, it was actually in 2002, we legalized it, we've had sex tourism now. Now we actually have sex tourism, which is, problematic in other ways. I mean, Amsterdam has a terrible problem with sex tourism. Germany, certain regions of Germany are starting to have a huge problem with sex tourism. And I think, and now the European Union is also discussing making the Swedish model the predominant model, or the European legislated model, which is just how did you frame it yesterday on Monday? With the I can't remember the phrasing you used, but that's how addled my brain is. The oh dear moment.
Oh dearism.
Yeah, it's an oh dearism.
Right, okay. Well, what's the most harmful thing to Germany about sex tourism?
I mean, sex tourism brings in, it means you have very large bordels, in some cases very small communities.
Right.
With a lot of frequency of people who are questionable. I'm going to say questionable. Questionable social standard. Which is a bit of a problem for small communities in some cases. Usually border communities to different countries.
Yeah, okay. But does it bring in a lot of money?
I've never actually found anything about that, but I'm going to assume yes.
I'm afraid since it's been legalized and you're having the traffic from the like the sex tourism, has child predators gone up at all, or has it gone down?
As far as I know, from the one study I've seen on that, it's gone down. But I've only ever seen one study, and the rate for that was a very small look at a very tight time frame. So the question is, if you had a look at a longer time frame and looked at it more exactly what it would be, I cannot tell you.
Because my concern with sexual tourism is it gives more opportunities for predators from other countries to come and, prey on small communities.
Usually these things are very well policed. At least I know in the towns I've lived in, or the cities I've lived in, those areas of city are well policed, or in some cases even owned by legalized crime, as we had in my city for a very long time.
Right.
You know.
So I mean, I see it. I mean, I'm thinking of this as being like drugs. If it's illegal, if it's in the hands of criminals, it's in the hands of criminals. It's done criminally. So so then that's when you probably I can see how, because it takes the business away from sex traffickers and what have you, that pimping an underage girl would actually, for example, would actually happen less. Also, what if, because I did hear of a case, I think it was in the UK, that a guy had been in a brothel, had noticed there was an underage girl there, and he reported it, but he didn't report it straight away because he was scared to admit, well, what were you doing in a brothel? Whereas if you're not ashamed of the fact that you were buying sex, then you'll be more ready to come forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as, like, let's say someone goes into a brothel, starts a fight in a brothel, and if brothels are illegal in that country, it's very hard for the owners of the brothel to, just call the police. So they have people ready to do violence in the brothels to kick those kinds of people out or keep them away, which, doesn't work very well.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So, anyone have closing thoughts?
By the way, we've just found a number on how much money it's made. 14.5 billion euros in the sex trade annually.
Wow.
So it's a huge industry. And, I mean, the German taxes, we love that. I mean, 14.5 billion euros, that's a shit ton of money.
Yeah. Wow. Well, on that bombshell, it's good night from Koki.
Have a good night. Hamster prosperity.
Good night from Fartis.
Good night. Go to more brothels.
Exactly. And good night from Midnight.
Good night, guys. The chickens are still safe.
Hurrah. And it's good night from me. Happy Wednesday, YouTube. Happy Wednesday, everyone. And once again, this is your host, Alex, introducing Koki Pirate.
Howdy, howdy.
And Fratis.
Hello, world.
And Midnight Goddess.
It's Wednesday. Get your hump on.
Exactly. And today's story is from last Friday, and it's about that European hotbed of sodomy that is the Eurovision Song Contest, and in particular, the news that the transgender contestant, Cochnita Wurst, has won, following, of course, some controversy. Controversy of this kind, of an LGBTQ kind, not being anything new for Eurovision, of course. But we've actually all just watched the video, watched the winning video, heard the winning song and the winning voice, and I suppose I'll hand it over to you, Koki.
I don't have much to say. I mean, I've always understood Eurovision to be a very politicized event, but the fact that, a lot of people are willing to, vote for Austria, was it?
Oh, yes, Austria.
Despite I don't know if it's because of or, whatever. The point is that I think it says something when people are willing to vote for, a member of the trans community, that they're entering a bit more into the sphere of acceptance, so they still have a long way to go. There's still a lot of discrimination against them, but it certainly helps their visibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's two positive Eurovision things in a row. Because I don't know if they won last year, but last year there was a thing, I didn't see it, but there was an act including a same-sex kiss. And there were nations that were outraged and yada yada yada. This year you kind of think, Russia, are you going to keep entering? Because we know you don't want to. But anyway, Fratis, your thoughts?
I think it's. I mean, we can say it's because she's transgendered and stuff like that, but she was a brilliant singer. Let's be quite honest. I mean, if you go and sit down and watch the video, or even and go sit down and watch the live video, it's just as good. She's a brilliant singer. She had a very no frills video and still managed to bring over a lot of feeling. I think it's interesting that she sings about transformation in a song.
Yeah.
Which is probably very important to herself. And I think it's a great political statement, and I think she made a great political statement with a quote where she says that that the night is for the people who vote for peace and prosperity, and that together we can do more stuff.
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing that quote. I can't remember it exactly. And I'm very happy for her. And I hope at least that this can continue, that we can make progress. And you already mentioned that Russia might stop entering, and I'd like to explain maybe why. Because if you enter the Eurovision Song Contest, you are required to do three things actually. One, enter a contestant every year. How you pick them is up to yourself. Two, you have to broadcast the entire show, cover to cover, in other words, on some kind of television. And three, you can cut nothing out of any performance. And that's the really important one, So if you have someone like transsexual going on, and your country is very against transsexuals, or even has laws against transsexuals, or laws against homosexuality, you cannot cut it out. You start a petition before the competition and discuss it with the people looking at this or in control of this, but you cannot cut it out once it's decided. So, I think it's, in a way, it sticks it to Putin, and I kind of like that. And a great musician won, and I'm very happy for her, and I hope she continues to have a very great time.
And Midnight Goddess, your thoughts?
I think she's fabulous. First of all, her voice is absolutely impeccable. As most people know, I am hearing impaired, so I wear hearing aids. And when somebody sings, it hurts me if they're off key, because everything's magnified, right? So her voice was flawless. Like, it was just absolutely stunning, to the point where I actually thought she was miming, because it was just that flawless. And then the gown. We have to talk the gown. Girl has taste, And then the political statement that she made by having a beard, dressed to the nines, was not only about, transformation and transition, but it's turning over old stereotypes and old images of what we once believed were gender identity, because gender identity, as we now know, is not the same as sexuality. So I think she's not only going to be a wonderful role model for a lot of the LGBT community. She has opened doors for a lot of the LGBT community, just in doing this, being brave enough to do it. Because in some places you can be killed for this, so it takes somebody who has, that brave foot to step forward and put themselves out there like that. Because she could have just gone in and entered as female, and you wouldn't have been able to tell. She phenomenal dresser, phenomenal singer, absolutely stunningly gorgeous. She didn't need to wear the beard, she didn't need to make the statement, and yet she put herself out there. And it's small acts like that are what is going to start changing people's mind. And I just can't say enough. I think she's absolutely fabulous, and you guys, you need to check this woman out. Alex, if would you be able to post the link?
Of course, the link will be in the description.
Okay.
For anyone who hasn't seen it, its views are climbing massively. Anyway, it's like you look at it, it's like oh my god. So it'll be. I don't know who in the world won't have seen this by the time of broadcast, but if you haven't, check it out. It's in the description.
Well, there are 8 billion people in this world. I'm sure there'll be a couple who haven't seen it. But
That's
she's
true.
just fabulous, and I think it's a wonderful time for her to be a role model for a lot of people, because we're in a lot of not weird times right now, but we're in a time of social hate and social bigotry and all of this stuff that's been going on in the news and everything. And then to have a transgendered woman come out in this type of venue, she is just going to be a wonderful role model for people, transgendered or not, but LGBT or not, just to be true to yourself and to be unique and to be who you are. That's just such a bold statement.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's about time we had somebody as fierce, out there representing the community, like RuPaul used to, RuPaul was fierce back in her day, and now we've got this beautiful woman who's come in to be that role model that we lost when RuPaul stopped performing. So I think this on a lot of fronts is going to be an awesome thing for not only the LGBT community, but for the world in general.
Yeah, and I do think, although I will admit I've only actually watched Eurovision properly 1 year, it is great that Europe has this, that it is that kind of platform. Some people sneer at it, but there are definitely some hits that deserve to be there. Does anybody have anything else to add?
I'm just click back on the video. It currently has 5 million views. I mean, looking at the comment section is full of horrible people. So you might just want to skip that.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's the video itself has had about 5 million views. I'm a little sad that the thumbs up and thumbs down don't really represent the video.
Yeah, there are more thumbs up than there are thumbs
only
down.
About
but
a couple of thousand, which is...
Yeah, and well, let's all make sure that we give it a like. But as for the comment section, haters gonna hate.
Yeah.
Just give a hater a hug.
But yeah, I still think that the Eurovision Song Contest usually has, from the 20 or so countries that jump in, at least usually you have 1 or 2 decent artists in between there. It's just never Britain.
You would think that a country with Britain's history of contribution to the music of the world would do better in an international singing contest.
But they don't.
But we don't, no. But
yeah.
There you are. I'm still going to blame all the countries in Europe that hate us too much to vote for us. It's just like, the French aren't going to vote for us, are they? Come on.
I'd vote for you, and I'm French.
You're French Canadian. You don't live next door to us. Imagine being the next door neighbours of the British. Come on now.
True.
Yeah, we're loud, we're drunk, we're just... actually, we're worse when we go to other countries, but still. So, yes, I've just characterised my own nation as a bunch of, nightmare neighbours.
So, what's it like for you to have British neighbours?
That's a very, very good point, actually. Well, London's its own thing. as much as I act like I'm proud of being a Londoner, an awful lot of Londoners are cunts. It has to be said. But there you go. It's weird, because you go to, like, Liverpool, and you go on their underground train system, and people just chat with each other. You go on the London Underground, people don't even make eye contact. Everybody's a robot. But, I don't know, I'm on a show which I put London in the title of my show, and I'm slagging off my city of birth. But anyway, well, there's a lot to do here. Anyway, any more closing thoughts that are on topic?
No, I think I said everything I needed to say.
I know how much Fartis hates London, so I was expecting him to leap in there.
I resisted.
Okay, well, it's good night from Koki.
May the hamster prosperity rest upon your head.
And it's good night from Fartis.
Good night. May London burn in hell.
And good night, midnight.
Good night. The chickens will be watching.
The chicken talk is starting. Between the hamsters and the chickens, I don't know. Anyway, Koki's hamster shits on your chicken. Ha! And and on that bombshell, it's good night from me. So happy Thursday, YouTube. Happy Thursday to my guests, Koki Pirates.
Hello, it is indeed Thursday. It is not, but it is.
Fratis.
May London burn, but good day.
I'll let you off as long as you agree that it is indeed Thursday.
Maybe.
Thursday is a state of mind. And Queenie.
I guess.
There you are. We are agreed that Thursday is indeed a state of mind. So, final topic of the week, which it kind of it's interwoven into a big ball of fucktardery that we have in the UK right now. Well, it's not really new, but it's in the run-up to the elections we're going to have here in Europe, and I'm sure they're not unconnected. What should have been a storm in a teacup started with the Daily Mail, or the Daily Fair, as I like to call it, making some big fucking fuss about a branch of Subway. I can't even remember where in the UK it was. Somewhere in England. Taking ham off the menu, only serving halal meat. It was phrased as the demands of Muslims. In fact, as I understand it, it's more of the demand of the Muslim community, of which there are a lot. In other words, it's a supply and demand situation reflecting the place where this Subway is. But of course, this gets leapt on, and it's supposed to, suddenly sandwiches are a reason. Vote UKIP because sandwiches. That basically is it. But then you've got the halal meat in pizzas and the halal meat in supermarkets, and is it all well labelled enough? Because we should really give a shit. Because like a few years ago, the BNP were going around telling people the British Navy only served halal meat, which is just a lie. It's the stupidest lie. As if you're going to go, I'm going to become a racist then. Thanks for telling me that. The animals are always stunned beforehand. They have to be. We have European laws about how animals are treated. This type of media are very selective about when they give a shit about how animals are treated. And interestingly enough, turkeys are always killed in this way. It's the slitting of the throat. So what do Christians eat every Christmas? What is technically a halal turkey? There's no such thing as a haram turkey. But anyway, I'm quite pleased with my summation, actually. Vote UKIP because sandwiches. Koki, your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are this is a perfect example of creeping Sharia. Yes, that meme has to come back. I don't know about like the taste or quality. Well, either way, these are mostly shops in heavily Muslim communities, so even that's not a case to be made. I guess the small minority of non-Muslims can't get ham at Subway, maybe. It really is silly, though. I don't understand how halal would affect the quality of, like, every time you buy some chicken or beef or whatever, you don't ask how the cow was killed. It really shouldn't bother anyone.
No, not at all. It's asinine. It's. I think for some people it's an excuse, and I think for some people, certainly from the point of view of parts of the media, and if you're UKIP and you want votes, then it's you can get people angry and scared if they feel that this really is the Islamification of, maybe at some point somebody really wanted a ham sandwich particularly, and they went to a Subway that didn't often get that demand, and it stopped being profitable to stock it. That the story does, insofar as there is a story, get bigger than that. I will point out, when I first saw this story, my first thought was some bullshit that the Daily Mail had reported regarding a swimming pool a couple of years ago. And pretty much, when inspected and examined, pretty much every element of this swimming pool story turned out to be nonsense. If not twisted, then exaggerated, or indeed just completely made up to the point where, guess what, shock horror, the Daily Mail story, there was no story. Now, Francis, I think you're chomping at the bit over this one, aren't you?
It's just a terrible... I'm going to say it this way. Before I started researching this story, I was somewhere on the fence about halal slaughtering. I thought it very barbaric, very old-time, not very effective. And then I started to research this, and I ran across a few very good articles and a few very good science papers, and I read through all of it, and my opinion is switched 180%. And I'd quickly talk about a little bit of the science and the thing behind it. You already said that halal slaughtering for certain types of animals is normal. But the thing about halal slaughtering compared to what we usually slaughter them is, like with chickens and turkeys, if you buy normal, non-halal turkeys, and this also goes for Jewish Cochnita, I think it's called, meat. But basically Kabbalah meat, Kabbalah okayed meat. A chicken will get taken, get put into this little like runway thing where it can't get out or can't move, and then it'll be dunked in water and electrocuted till it's stunned. That's how we normally slaughter chickens. Also small sheep, cows, and lots of other small animals. With bigger ones, we do something what's just called bolting, which is we take a big bolt and smack it through the back of their skull. By the way, this is not very effective. If we take one where it penetrates the skull, still in 6% of the times it completely fails. The animal is not stunned, and when we slaughter it, it is in great pain. Right. If we take a non-penetrating bolt, it's 1 in 3 animals.
Right.
And this is all non-halal slaughtering. We've not got halal slaughtering. Halal slaughtering tends to work with less stunning. But with modern methods of halal slaughtering, which all 3 plants in the US, which are the biggest plants in the world, have, the thing goes down. And the best way to measure this is a type of hormone which you have in the blood and in the bones and body if you have stress, which is called what was it called? Cortisol. It's called cortisol, and the best way to measure basically stress levels after death is to see how much cortisol you have in the tissue. And with non-halal, basically haram slaughter, it's 123 nanomole per milliliter, and with halal it's 41. And just that number says a lot about the slaughtering. So it might, in the first sense, seem very brutal and very bad, but all in all, it's not. Plus, I mean, this is not the first large scandal we've had in the last, let's say, 5 years about animal slaughtering. Like from 2009 until 2011, Animal Aid, a animal rights group, secretly found evidence of unspeakable cruelty and illegal acts in 8 out of 9 randomly chosen British slaughterhouses.
Right.
And those numbers I provided with the bolt and non-bolt is done by the European Food Safety authorities, and they found that in 2004. So this is all science. This is genuine science that's been done. A lot of the scientific papers actually support this view. When you go and read into it, it's actually, better. And it's sad that things like the BDA, which is the British Veterinary Association, the Daily Fail, and parties like UKIP will attack this kind of stuff with no scientific evidence on their side. And they should be slapped down for it, but they're not. And that's just highly annoying.
Yeah. Well, the reaction that I see is, to my shame, people that for some reason I have on my Facebook, but at least it means I can keep an eye on this shit, is they link the Daily Fail story with a rant about how Muslims are taking over and are getting preferential treatment and animal. And another one, something I saw was animal cruelty and the prevention of cruelty to animals is more important than your religion. Yada yada. It somehow does just appeal to the kind of tribalism that is taking us down the very worrying path that we've been discussing quite a lot in London After Midnight over the past few weeks. So thank you for the information. I didn't know any of that.
If you would want, I would link you the one of the biggest science articles on religious slaughter. You can maybe link it in the description bar, so everyone can go have a look at it. It's a piece from March of '94 by one of the in the US by a very prestige, I guess, animal rights activist researcher. I'll link it in.
Okay.
So everyone can maybe read that.
Excellent, thank you so much. And people, I got flack last week from a commenter because I said in the video that I was going to link something in the description, and then even though I'd put a header for it, I somehow didn't link it or it didn't save. I don't know if I got distracted and forgot. But I do feel free to comment if I have forgotten to link this or anything. Queenie, your thoughts on this subject?
If it's supply and demand, it's not the Islamification of anything. It's the capitalization of something. It's been decided by Subway that in those areas it is more profitable for them to serve halal meat instead of ham. That's pretty much it. I don't know how there's anything more to the story than that. It's like supply and demand. It is profitable for Subway to serve halal meat in those areas, so they're doing so because they want to make more money.
Yeah, it is funny how the Daily Fail can change one letter. Muslim demand, Muslim demands. Because those two things mean very different things. If you see what I mean.
This is actually, looking at this, it just reminds me of the kind of alarmist stuff that, all the anti-Semitic stuff that's saying the Jews opened the floodgates for multiculturalism. I just kind of find it humorous because apparently halal meat is made largely by Jewish Americans. Not that there's any sort of connection, I just find it funny.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, the three largest plants are all in the US, and they're all run by Jewish people, mainly because a lot of the rules for the Jewish traditional food eating and the Muslim traditional eating come from the old part of the Old Testament, which basically both parties revere. It's still funny that they can't agree on
that. Yes, the Tim Minchin song. We don't eat pigs, you don't eat pigs, let's all not eat pigs together. I can't quite remember how it goes. But, yes, they are the case for peace. So, yes, so more fucktardery. And another thing is the timing of this. The Daily Mail, I think, actively want people voting for UKIP. This seems very clear. They're not just feeding off of people's fears and paranoias. The timing of kicking up this stink in the weeks before the election, and admittedly, the stupidest people will vote for UKIP because of shit like this. But we do let stupid people vote. Should we let stupid people have the vote? That should be a topic for one show.
Unfortunately.
I mean, the thing is, capitalizing on fears of low information voters is still a very viable tactic. As sadly as it is. I mean, yeah. That the Daily Mail and UKIP run hand in hand is kind of, kind of obvious in the direction they go. They both go for low-informed voters with clearly xenophobic or xenophobically sounding things, and try to frame it in a way that they don't quite sound xenophobic, but really they are.
Well, I've always assumed that the Daily Mail do what they do to make money because they're a business. Headlines that make people angry, whether it's about this, that, or the other, people will buy it so that they can rant about it and feel angry and yada, yada, yada. It doesn't necessarily mean that a paper like the Daily Mail believes all of its own shit. In fact, I've seen, I can't quote any off the top of my head, but examples of columnists whose views appear to change depending on who's paying their paycheck, which means that a journalist can move around the political compass according to the paper. So, there were some broadsheet journalists and columnists who did work for tabloids, for example. But the timing of this, it's a very typical Daily Mail story, but it just sort of like, you're making this kind of fuss. In fact, basically, they must at least be completely cynical, because at least think, actually, maybe this particular bullshit story could wait until after the election. But no, that they go hand in this way wouldn't have occurred to me. It's like they've picked, okay, it's like a tactical way of, actually trying to get UKIP in. So, okay, it's not just a cynical thing to sell papers. You actually believe this shit, or at least to some extent.
I mean, you don't need the reporters themselves to believe it. You just need some higher ups, like the owner or the editor-in-chief or something, to believe it.
Yeah.
I'd just like to remind everyone to not vote for racist, okay?
Exactly. Racism's bad, people.
Racism's bad. Okay, kids?
Exactly. Yeah. So, on that note, appropriately enough, next week's episodes / omnibus will be an election / UKIP cunts special. And so be sure to join us. Although I suppose as of hang on. Yeah, so several of the editions will actually be before the election. Because it's always a Thursday, isn't it? Is it the 22nd it's on?
It depends on the nation. Like, we don't vote till the 25th.
Okay.
The nations vote from the 22nd to the 25th. So it'll be somewhere between Thursday and Sunday people vote, I think. Or is it Thursday and Monday? I can't remember. But it's somewhere between that time.
Okay. So if you're German, it'll all be before it. Because, hang on, 25th is a Sunday.
Yes.
Oh, you vote on Sundays. Oh, okay.
We traditionally vote on Sundays, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, for us, it's Thursday the 22nd. And, okay. And so, yeah, be sure to join us then. And I suppose that's all there is to say. So, it's good night from Koki.
May the hamster of prosperity rest upon your head and not the head of those in UKIP.
Koki, eat a Snickers. You always talk about hamsters when you're hungry. But yes, indeed, I share the message. And no disrespect intended to the hamster. That was just a thing that I improvised earlier when you talked about getting a Snickers.
You don't want to invoke the wrath of the hamster of prosperity, just saying.
Indeed. And a good night from Fratis.
Maybe we can torch London to get rid of the rats. UKIP support. But good night, everyone.
And good night from Queenie.
Oh, sorry, I was having joyful banter with my boyfriend. Good night, everybody.
And it's good night from me. This has been London After Midnight with your host, Alex. Ta-ta for now.